How is the MCU like Supernatural 14 years ago? Today, we're going to be comparing the modern day era of the Marvel Cinematic Universe to Supernatural after season 5, back in 2010, what the series Supernatural went through. There's a lot of comparisons. They both had a big apocalypse event. They both struggled to find where the plot's going to go next. We might vary in opinion on how Supernatural handled it or how the MCU is currently handling it. Does the MCU still have hope? And can it learn anything from Supernatural? We're going to discuss all of that and more. I'm Joshua Knoll, one of your hosts. Glad to be here on my birthday, actually. And I am here with the one and only Christian Ashley, the man who inspires us all. We all wake up in the morning and go, should we podcast? I think we should, just so we have an excuse to say the name Christian Ashley. And that's why we're here today.
Well, thank you, Joshua, and a very happy birthday to you on your actual birthday this time.
Yeah, I don't usually like to tell people my birthday, but the SG crowd's like my family. They gotta know, I guess. Also, Will posted it everywhere, so I have to give up on keeping it low key. It's now just out there, which is good. Thank you, Will. Appreciate it. Love you. What I'm geeking out on my birthday, my cat woke me up at 4 this morning, and I could not go back to sleep. So naturally, I woke up and finished my first Kingdom Hearts game of the year. Because, I finished last year platinuming all the games. So this year I started going chronological order. So usually I go like the order they release, Kingdom Hearts, Chain of Memories, Kingdom Hearts 2, etc. This time I'm going like Birth by Sleep and trying to do chronological, but Kingdom Hearts doesn't really happen in a singular timeline. It's weird. I'm doing my best. Yes. And I'm pulling one out of James' book. I'm doing the opposite of Platinum. I'm doing a speed run through all of them.
Ooh.
Which is accommodates my availability more, and it's just more fun to see how quickly I can get through the game. Yeah. So Christian, what are you geeking out?
More power to you on that. I don't have the patience for speed runs, ironically enough. But as for me, just released not too long ago, Persona 3 Reload, a remake of Persona 3 just came out. I have been enjoying that immensely. I haven't played Persona 3. It's about further than I care to go. When the quality of life changes that came in Persona 4 and Persona 5 really helped me like the games more. I can't play Persona 3 as it was, but this has changed things. There's no fatigue in Tartarus. It's pretty dang good so far. I'm in like the third time you go into Tartarus at the moment, so really enjoyable. Loving it.
Fun. Well, guys, now that you know what we're geeking out on, let us know what you're geeking out on down below. And, always rate and review the show over on Podchaser, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your show. You're on YouTube. We're not releasing this to the main feed, I don't think. We might later on, but right now we're live on YouTube, so smash that like button, hit subscribe. We're always trying to grow what we do, and we want to do a big shout out and thank you to James Barrett for supporting the show. I believe he's over on Patreon, but he might be a Captivator Apple Podcast. I just kind of put them all together and thank people for supporting, because people who support the show are awesome. And with that, we're going to jump into the main part of our discussion today. And doing that we're talking about the MCU and Supernatural, and I don't think a lot of people would put these two together. I don't think a lot of people are sitting there thinking these are some similar IPs that need to be talked about. Maybe they are. Maybe I just like to think that I had a novel idea. I probably haven't. But I wanted to just kick off with why I thought of this comparison. It was literally just Supernatural is one of my all-time favorite TV shows. And there's been rumors lately of a season 16, which I am worried about, because season 15 ended so well. And I know there's a lot of controversy around it, but it actually tied things up. And I'm like, even if everyone didn't like it, at a certain point, you got to learn to leave it alone. As much as I do love all the characters, if they made a 16, I'd watch it. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not gonna say I wouldn't be there at midnight waiting for it to drop. I love this series, but I'm also nervous because of what happened last time at the end of season 5, when it should have ended. They continued with season 6, and I loved the characters, but there were so many seasons. I was like, oh, okay, so the world's in danger because this guy's the worst thing. Okay, and then the next season, the world's in danger because this is new bad guy is now the worst thing that's ever. Okay. and just over and over. Got really repetitive and kind of boring, even though we love the characters. And the MCU, I don't feel this way personally. For the most part, I like a lot of the modern MCU, but a lot of people are burned out. They're tired of it and think that it should have ended after Endgame. They're wrong, but they think that it should have. And I can see where they're feeling that angst, where it's coming from. And yeah, that feeling that I have with Supernatural is very similar to the feeling I think a lot of people have with the Marvel Cinematic Universe right now. Christian, what do you think of the comparison? Just face value. Were you like, wow, Josh is dumb. Why did he think of this? Or were you like, wait a minute. Okay, I can kind of see it.
Yeah, when you first texted me about this, I was intrigued. I was like, okay, that's something I don't think I would have come up with on my own. But when you bring it to my attention, the pieces kind of connect together and go, okay, yeah, this we could talk about this for plenty of time for an episode.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. And then I was like, oh, this will just be a quick like little 20-minute episode. And then I started putting that line together, and I'm like, oh man, this might be a struggle. I hope I don't do a side tangent like I'm doing right now. Anyway, so Christian, before we get too far into this, let's just break down what our relations to these IPs are. I kind of broke down that I wasn't always a big Supernatural fan. I actually came in at season 5. So right before season 5 dropped, I was in college. We went to the same college, ironically enough. A mutual friend of ours actually showed me the show, and he actually wrote down a list of like the main episodes that progressed the story, because that was back before everything was always tied together. It was still kind of episodic at first. And I was like, okay, cool. I want to catch up. And I sat there and I watched it. And I remember the first night seeing it, I like binge watched it, and I ended on like Bloody Mary episode at 3 a.m. And that was a terrible decision. But from there, I came to love the show. It's like the first season's kind of like horror light, like monster flick, monster of the week kind of thing, maybe. And then as the season progressed, it gets a little more supernatural, as like Christian angels, demons, ghosts, and a little bit more comedic, I'd say. I feel like it got a little less serious as time went on. And then you have the apocalypse that was being built up to. So once I caught up, I was like, oh, damn, the world's about to be damned. And that's where I jumped in at. And I was like, okay. And I watched them take on Lucifer. And man, that was incredible. And then season 6 happened. And needless to say, I was disappointed. I kept watching because there's so many characters I loved. And then the same thing happened to season 7, and then season 8, and then season 9. And I think it was 10 or 11 when I started loving the show again. They introduced some new characters, started to actually get a feel for where the story's going, and I liked the ending of the series. MCU, I'm literally wearing a Captain America shirt right now. I love Marvel. I've always loved Marvel. I grew up with Marvel. One of the first things I ever remember reading was a Spider-Man comics. These Spider-Man, Captain America, they're my people. Kamala Khan's one of my favorite things ever, and I actually do really like what the MCU did with her, even though it's different, and I like the comic book version better. Doesn't mean I can't appreciate what they did on the show. So that's where I'm at. Christian, what's your history with the MCU, Supernatural, all this stuff?
MCU, I was there from the very beginning. Like when Iron Man came out, I wanted to see it bad. So my dad brought me there. I think my brother was with us too. Maybe my sisters. I can't remember off the top of my head. But, that big twist at the end where he actually gives out a secret identity as someone who's big into comics, like where you don't give out your secret identities. Like,
oh, yeah.
Like so big. They're changing everything. I want to see what comes next. Then we got the Hulk. Then we got Iron Man 2. And time went on. We eventually got Spider-Man back into the fold. Like, I love the MCU, even though there are some duds along the way, those eventually. But Supernatural was one I also got into in college, a little before you, I think, because I started. It was that time of TiVo, and like, hey, I have all this free time. Well, why don't I use this beautiful technology that allows me to tape things when I wouldn't normally be there? And I started watching from the beginning, and fell in love with the series. Got to season 5. It's like, yes, this is the perfect ending. What do you mean more is coming? And there were times when I was faithful to the show. There were times my eyes looked elsewhere. I've seen everything since then. I have opinions. I'll put it that way.
Great. just to backtrack a little bit, the MCU back when I was I'm gonna say less saved. Is that a thing? I think I grow in my salvation. So I think less saved can be a thing. I would use less than legal means to watch some stuff, right? So that's how I caught up on Supernatural. But I remember when the original Thor came out, we found a copy before it released, but it cut off right before the final fight scene. So the comic book nerd in me was like, "Oh yeah, everything matches perfectly. This is great." And then you see it in the theater, and you're like, "What do you mean he broke the rainbow bridge?" I was like, "Wait a minute, what?" And I don't know, man. I loved that. I actually had an ongoing thing up until Guardians 2. So I watched the first Iron Man in theaters. And then Hulk came out. I ended up seeing it twice. I was like, oh, that's kind of funny. So Iron Man 2 came out. I was like, it'd be kind of funny if I just saw it 3 times. And then it became 4 for Thor, and then 5 for Captain America, 6 times in theater for Avengers. I had a friend who was like the manager of the theater. I wasn't paying for all this, mind you. But it came all the way to Guardians 2. I watched that like 16 times in the theater, and I was like, I think this is enough. I think this tradition has to die. Because at that point, I did have to pay. That was too much.
I can't say anything. I often use less than, shall we say, correct means to access things that I wouldn't normally be able to see. Yeah. So, as well aware as I am, that's probably not the right thing to do. It's also very convenient. And back in the day, when we did go to the theater a lot with my dad, it's a lot harder to do now. We had what our friend group called the Ashley Special. So we paid for one ticket and aligned the time so we could go to a different movie. So I cannot sit here from a high horse and look down upon you when I have engaged in the same.
Listen, no one who's ever worked for theater is listening and surprised right now. Like, honestly. So I did want to get to, let's go ahead and get ahead a little bit. Just going to show our cards. How do you feel about each show having going past the apocalypse event? For Supernatural to say, this is the book of Revelation, the apocalypse, and then it ends differently than the Bible version, which, this is the year of religions on our show. So I think we'll probably talk more about Supernatural and Christianity and Satanism and all the other stuff later on throughout the year. But yeah, they had the apocalypse and decided to go forward after that. And then the MCU has them have Thanos snap half of everybody out of existence. Every hero ever show up to have a giant fight scene. And then Iron Man and Cap die and you still go? How do we feel about that? How do we feel about both of these?
Well, Supernatural's relationship with Christianity, much like the Pirate Code, is more like guidelines than actual rules as far as their theology. Once again, I don't expect anything from Hollywood to 100% align with me, but I'd like a little more respect for the source material, and Supernatural most definitely does not have that. So when they went beyond it, like, I wasn't expecting a biblically accurate, and that's even saying that we know 100% sure how exactly things are going to.
Yeah, we all disagree on that.
In the end times, there's a reason so many people have debated for thousands of years, whether there's a rapture or not, whether, God will actually appear, Jesus will come back, all that. There's plenty to debate there, but that's more for a whole church episode. We'll get to that.
Which we're going to do in a couple weeks, actually.
Yes. So I'm looking forward to that. So I can give my hot takes and heretical ideas. But so I knew they're going for an apocalypse, but they're not going to get what I'm going to think is going to happen. So when the show continued, it's like, sure, I guess. And well, ultimately, it had its ups, it's had its downs. I would argue more downs. Now, as far as the MCU is concerned, like, I knew there was going to be more after Endgame. I knew there were more stories to tell. So I didn't care, like, that they didn't stop there. In fact, I thought they'd be doing a massive disservice to newer characters who didn't really get a chance to shine if they had stopped right there. So while it would have been a more complete story, maybe, per se, like, we're losing something by staying there.
Yeah, I'm a little torn on the MCU stuff. I kind of wish we would have got more of a soft reboot. And instead of them just continuing all of the same character, which I'm contradicting myself in the future. What I'm going to say later on is the opposite of this. but I wish they would have started more with new, like Iron Man 1 all over again. Instead of having Spider Man and we're just going to try and piggyback off of that, what if we just started with Kamala Khan and built back from nothing? Like, that would have been kind of fun. But I still like what they did. I need more Spider Man. I need more of Cap with the Cap, Winter Soldier, and Falcon. Honestly, I love a lot of Phase 5 and Phase 6 of MCU. A lot more than I liked Phase 2 of MCU. So there's always that. I prefer Falcon and Winter Soldier over Iron Man 3 any day of the week. I prefer, honestly, I think I even prefer Love and Thunder over, what was that? That was that second Thor that came out in Phase 2?
Dark World.
Yeah, which I even like Dark World. And I still am like, no. Like, I like it, but it's still like the bottom. So, I don't know. I'm torn on that. Supernatural, same thing. Season 5, I think if it would have ended there, it would have been a better, complete story. It would have been more succinct. But the more I think about it, the more I'm like, we only see Crowley once before the end of Season 5. If I didn't get to fully develop and have that character fleshed out and get to know him, I do feel like my life might be slightly worse for that. Like, I feel like my life is better for knowing the character Crowley, you know? And I actually do love what happens in the last 5 seasons. To kind of give my take on a lot of supernatural stuff, part of why I like it is I think they're intentionally criticizing religion. I think they were fairly accurate to a lot of the Catholic depictions of angels and different stuff. Castiel being the angel of Thursdays, all of that stuff, the angel of free will. And then, you have that, our main team in Supernatural, Sam and Dean are the hunters, the brothers. And then you have Cass and Crowley being called #Team Free Will. And Jack later on. We'll talk about him later. But I'm like, yeah, that was kind of the point of the show, I thought. So having the apocalypse subverted because predestination is just a bunch of bull crap, and really we all are in charge of our own fate, even if I don't agree with that, I do like how they got their story across. And I think part of what made the next 5 seasons stink for me is they weren't hitting that theme at all. But then you get near the end, spoilers for everyone wondering, you get God's sister involved, you get God involved, Lucifer shows up, and you're back into this, is it free will or is our story already written? And I think it gets a lot more meta and a lot more on the nose at the end. But I liked it again, I think, because it was getting back to the point of the show. Whereas a lot of the stuff in the middle was just, we need stuff so that people will keep buying our stuff. Yeah. And that's what I didn't care for. So if you had to rate the MCU post the snap and Supernatural post season 5, where are you going?
I will say MCU. I might give post Endgame a 7.5. It's like this stuff I really enjoyed. Like Guardians 3 was amazing. No Way Home was like a love letter to every Spider-Man, trilogy and duology out there. And then we had some stinkers, like, respect to Ryan Doze, who has a very different opinion than me. I did not care for Love and Thunder as much.
I'm with you.
And, some of the TV shows like Moon Knight, excellent, loved it.
Mm-hmm.
She-Hulk, I was like, I'm okay with it by the end. I ultimately enjoy it, but there's definitely some changes I would have made to the show.
Same, yeah.
I'm not a fan of what they did. Yeah, stuff like that. So overall, I'll probably give it like a 7.5. Now, Supernatural, like when you put this question, it's like, how will I actually rate the last 10 seasons? And ultimately, I came to a 5 out of 10 because there's stuff like I really enjoy. Like, if we lived in a world where Scooby Natural never happened, we would be poor for it.
I don't even like that you suggested that world.
But like, as far as like the actual story content, with as far as theology is concerned and all this mess, like, once again, knowing where the writers' hearts are for the most part and knowing what they understand of Christianity is very apparent in their writing. I give a little grace that way, but there's a point where it stops. And that's kind of where I end. Like, there's stuff I really like. When they're making fun of themselves, when you got the season 6 making fun of season 6, and the season 10 the musical or with the theatrical production episode, love that. Then I hate what they do with Chuck. I hate what they do with Amara and all that jazz. Like, I hate what they do with.
We are going to disagree on that.
I'm looking forward to it. I knew we would as soon as you started opening your mouth.
That's
But we'll
funny.
get there when we get there. But I say just 5 out of 10.
Oh man, okay. For me, Supernatural, the last 10 seasons, so after season 5, I'm probably still giving it a 9 out of 10. I still think it's one of the best shows out there. I'm showing a lot of grace for those middle seasons that I don't care for. But once I think God's Sister comes on board and you start having the story come back together, a lot of those things get forgiven for me because of how good the story was at the end. Yeah, theological problems aside, how good the story was at the end. Of course, also it does kind of support my own arguments for like universalism, which I know Christian doesn't love. So that's probably why I'm a little biased too. But you do have that. The part of why I can forgive the middle seasons is because of the character development. So the end that I love makes absolutely no sense if you don't know who Crowley is, if you don't know who Castiel is, all these other people who really you don't learn about the characters until the middle. MCU, I'm going to go 6.5 out of 10. It's a lot harder because it's a lot less consistent than Supernatural, because you have stuff like you mentioned, No Way Home. Man, that's a 10 out of 10, right? like Guardians 3, 10 out of 10. But then you have Black Widow. Why did we make this? What was the point of this? And then you have
earlier and better.
We have the Moon Knight show, and I'm like, oh man, top tier television. And then you have like some of the other shows. I don't even remember some of the other shows that I'm like, why did we do this exactly? And so they're all over the place. I still like it more than I don't like it. And some of the stuff that they're made, again, some of the best stuff. I have a hard time thinking of any MCU movie that's as good as Guardians 3. I love Winter Soldier. That might be the only one that compares like for me. So I'm like, it's just not very consistent. So I'm going to go 6.5.
Fair.
Yeah. So Christian, could you summarize the stories of each of these IPs as far as like what led up to the respective apocalypse events that we're talking about?
Okay. If I forget anything, feel free to add on. So for Supernatural, we start, bare bones. There are mythical creatures out there. Our job is to hunt them, protect humanity, blah, blah, blah. Oh, no, demons are a thing. Oh, no, angels are a thing. Oh, and the whole reason the demons have been messing with Sam is so that he could one day be one of potential children that they mess with to open up the keys to allow Lucifer to come back and unleash the apocalypse upon the world, while heaven, on the other hand, is being under the orders of Michael because they're not really aware where God is right now. They're kind of at that point of, well, this is where we knew things were heading, but God isn't here to tell us what to do. So I'm going to take charge. And their ultimate goal is one of them is going to possess Dean, the other is going to possess Sam. We find Sam is supposed to be Lucifer's vessel. Dean is supposed to be Michael's. Dean rejects that. But conveniently, a couple seasons earlier, they did meet their half brother, their dad had on the side, named Adam, who shows up to be Michael's vessel, dies, and is never brought back until like the very end, even though they had all this time. They
At least it was foreshadowed. At least it wasn't completely out of nowhere.
So it wasn't out of nowhere, but it's also kind of very convenient.
Oh yeah.
And this is when they meet Castiel, become friends with him, start teaching him a little more about humanity. The apocalypse comes. Sam should have died, but he is able to come back to life through supernatural shenanigans, quite literally. And while the apocalypse is averted, there's still more story to tell because the fangirls need it, and we have 10 more seasons to milk.
I'm one of the fangirls, to be fair.
And which, once again, there's stuff I do like in these other 10 seasons, but like majority-wise, the number goes down.
Yeah.
So that's go ahead.
I do want to insert just a few thoughts. I also, so part of this, what's fascinating about how the show is written, they don't just pull from Christian thought. So you will see some of these angels more represented how Islam would represent those angels. And a lot of it, what's interesting is, I'm trying to say this as carefully as I can. Well, I'm already a heretic on this show, I suppose. Look to Christian for good theology. I think they show some of the best parts of Satanism. And that's what gets left out a lot. A lot of this is more the Satanist perspective of it all, of how God was keeping people from free will and Lucifer was trying to rise up and represents that idea of free will. It's very much an American kind of religion, to be fair.
Yes.
And I think they showed that really well because you do have God wrote the story, apocalypse is how it's supposed to happen. What do you mean? Everyone's supposed to die? That's how it's supposed to happen. That's how it's supposed to happen, Gus. Really? Sorry. You have to make fun of the CW a little bit, even if you love it. But, like that whole mindset, and you're like, yeah, you know what? Actually, yeah, a lot of this stuff does seem really messed up. And then the idea of what if there's a third way? And the parallelism of Dean and Sam to Lucifer and Michael, where you have the two brothers, one who wants to be the right hand of the father doing exactly what he says, and the other who is, what about free will? What if everyone doesn't have to die? Who's actually willing to question orders and look past just the religion, which is, again, very much the point of Satanism. And I think it's the best point of Satanism. It's the stuff that really should challenge how we think and make us consider, even though, I'm not a Satanist, I'm a Christian, I still have to take these thoughts and consider if there's coming from a genuine place in people's hearts. And I think they have a point, and there's something I need to think about deeply there. Again, this isn't just a supernatural episode, so I don't want to take all our time on this. I just wanted to insert. I love the parallelism. I just love how all of it's done. It was done, those first 5 seasons, that's cinema. Afterwards, it's a TV show. First 5 seasons, complete masterpiece of art. Sorry. Anyway, on to the...
So MCU. Basically, as we're building up our main characters, which is how you do it, DC, by the way. So hopefully, James Gunn, you can do it a lot better. We take time learning who they are, why we should care about them. Boom. Then we have an Avengers movie where they band together. We know who they are, what they're about. They managed to stop their first invasion of Earth together, but we learned that not only were these aliens, the Chitauri, working for Loki, they were loaned by this mysterious figure known as Thanos, who is on the lookout for the Infinity Gauntlet so he can wield the Infinity Stones in the movies, Infinity Gems in the comics, where if he has all the stones together, he can pretty much make reality whatever he wants it to be. And his ultimate goal is to wipe out 50% of the population of the entire universe. That way, since this is different than the comics, he's not trying to court death in the movies, because I guess they didn't really want to go to the cosmological side of that. Instead, he's trying to reduce the amount of population that exists in reality so that the resources that are finite here aren't used up and people, stay beneath these numbers and stuff like that. So his goal, he actually, if you haven't read, the Infinity Gauntlet, he succeeds in wiping out 50% of everything that exists with a single snap of his fingers, which then leads to those who survive, fighting against that, working against him, managing to make a gauntlet of their own, bringing back everyone who was snapped away, defeating Thanos the first time and the Thanos of an alternate reality because shenanigans. And this leads us to the modern MCU that we have now.
Yeah. Man, I think that was a pretty good summation. Yeah, one thing also, just when we're thinking about like the comparisons, I like how both series have, I'm trying to word this carefully, not sympathetic bad guys. I don't think anyone's cheering for Thanos or Satan.
Yes.
But they don't have, they're bad. See, they're evil. They're not like mustache twirling. You have Supernatural, you have the angels are bad because they're just trying to do God's will, even if it means everyone dies. And Satan is bad because he's trying to kill God. So you have like this kind of nuanced thing. And the reason Satan's trying to kill God is because God is predetermined things. And God kind of did Lucifer dirty in Supernatural, right? Like he's like, yeah, I don't like you as much for no reason, really. So like, and God abandoned everyone. And Lucifer's feels feels betrayed. Like it's like the motives make sense. Thanos, even though he is crazy, the motive of, actually the best way for resources to flourish and for us all to be doing better is if there was just less of us using the resources. Again, he's crazy, but he's not just doing it because he's evil. He genuinely thinks it's what's best for everyone. So I think that both series did a really good job giving motives to the villains that you don't just hate them. Like, honestly, I don't think I'm really not even sure if anyone watching Supernatural wanted Lucifer to be gone forever. Like, we kind of wanted him to come back. And I think everyone in the MCU still kind of would be okay if Thanos came back. Like, they're good bad guys.
Yes.
Yeah.
I get it. I mean, because for Supernatural, it's that more people who misunderstand what Paradise Lost is trying to say, that when Satan is better to rule in hell than to serve in heaven. It's kind of him being a little 13-year-old edgelord who doesn't like what daddy has to say, and then trying to justify, well, I only fell because I'd rather be here than in heaven, versus, how more modern audience would look at that. Oh, well, that means he's the hero because he's a rebel, versus him actually being the bad guy who's trying to justify being the bad guy because he is doing evil things. So you get to Supernatural where he gets a better motivation, but it comes from that idea that we get from older works like Paradise Lost to kind of give Satan a little bit more characterization than the Bible does in particular.
Yeah, yeah. And then, speaking of the baddies, both series, I think that both series thought too much about their bad guys. That they thought the reason that it worked was because of Thanos. The reason that it worked was because of Lucifer. Which, again, we do love them. They did a great job with these. The problem is when they try to follow up and be like, the next bad guy's going to be just as bad. So for the MCU, they're like, we're going to do Kong next. Everything's going to be building to this multiverse time bad guy. I don't like Kong the Conqueror, but a lot of people love King. And yes, I pronounced it 2 different ways. Get over it, Christian.
Yes.
In Supernatural, you start off with Leviathans and you see that there's all these creatures that God made before humans, and that's where Purgatory comes in, and the mother of all creatures is called Eve, and that's supposed to be the big bad guy. I think both bad guys, we still yet to confirm with the MCU, but it kind of feels like both fell flat for different reasons. How do you feel about these villains of Eve and then of Kang the Conqueror in the MCU?
Starting with Eve, it's an interesting idea because, we have the question, okay, these monsters are here. Where do they come from? They have to have an origin point. So you go to something like in your more classical Greek mythology, you have Echidna. She is basically like Eve in that she is the mother of all monsters. If you see a monster in Greek mythology, chances are Echidna had some way in making her, just like Typhon being the father of all monsters, Echidna being the mother of all monsters. We have Eve here. So she's the one who created vampires and, shapeshifters and werewolves and what have you as time goes on here. And then the one she doesn't create are the Leviathans, which she kind of messes with for a bit. And these seasons here, I have very little memories of because I haven't rewatched these as
That's
much as
fair.
I've rewatched the first 5. So if I miss
I
something,
understand
correct
why.
me. Yeah. And as far as how she is, she's fine. I mean, there are certainly worse villains out there.
Yes, that's true.
I mean, you've got your Snokes who amount to nothing and
Or
have no
that
substance.
who was the guy in season 6 that he was a real dick. Sorry, they had a guy named Richard who was the main Leviathan, and they
Roman?
kept making dick jokes because
Yeah,
Dick's the nickname for
Richard
Richard. Yeah,
Richard Roman, I think was his name.
yeah.
Yeah, he was also okay. It's like more like here's what American consumerism is all about. You're all fat and ugly.
I gotta tell you, he was just Donald Trump. like
Pretty much.
regardless of how you feel about the guy, that is who that villain was in the show.
Yeah. I mean, the Leviathans were fine-ish as
Yeah,
villains.
the design was cool. The design was
Yeah.
cool. That's about it.
And
And then when
I understand
Borax defeated them, I was like, really? Borax of
no,
all things?
I,
Why?
I, I'm actually okay with that because it took
Really?
trial and error to figure out what got rid of
Okay.
them. Because
See,
vampire heart, stake in the heart, or ghost, put salt around it, hit it with rock salt in your gun. Like, okay, I can work with that. We don't know what they're weak to. Oh, it's this household cleaner item. Oh, that's interesting because I wouldn't have seen that coming.
super random, but and I'm not suggesting anyone does this at home. But when the angels fell, I don't remember what season that is, but there's a season where all the angels fell. It's like 7, maybe. Anyway,
7, I think.
uh, in just pure fangirl fashion, I did use methanol and borax ironically, yeah, if you make that a mixture and maybe light it on fire, it burns that green, that supernatural green. So we made angel wings and like laid between them, and it was fantastic for photos. I need to find those.
Wow.
Sorry, I was a huge fan. I still am a huge fan, but now that it's over, it's harder to fangirl as much. Oh man, yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
And then there's
Kang.
King. Yeah.
Kang is one of those villains. Like I love him when he's used well in the comics. When time travel comes up, things get convoluted by nature because as we perceive time, it's very different than we'll get changed the past. Is the past immutable? And like, can you only go here? Can you live within your own timeline? All that mess. Kang is one of those characters that pops up, and when written well, is pretty sinister, can cause the entire universe to just change because he changed one thing about the past and now he's in control of the earth. Like, I love that. Now, as far as he's done in the MCU, Loki, really well done. I enjoyed everything that was done with Victor Timely. Loki has been one of the biggest parts of the MCU post Endgame that has been done incredibly well, in my opinion. Ant-Man, on the other hand, so you're setting up your big villain who's going to be he's going to be your Thanos for this section. He's going to be your big bad. Who do you choose to be the first hero to beat him in any significant way?
Naturally, a hero based off of a bug that's not Spider-Man because everyone likes him too much.
I wouldn't even want Spider-Man to beat him off of the bat.
That would be awful. Maybe
like,
Doctor Strange would have been okay.
Yeah, there should be an Avenger level threat. I mean, if anyone should take him on his own, it would be someone like Doctor Strange in that scenario. Yeah. Since Captain America's gone, Iron Man is gone. I mean, Thor, for the most part, is not on Earth at this moment in time.
Scarlet Witch is gone.
Yeah. So it's like somehow if, Green Arrow defeated Darkseid on an off day,
that sounds fantastic, though.
I mean, you could make that story work, sure, but if you're setting up like from a point of view of a film, you want your villain to be taken seriously. Quantumania is not how I would have done it. I'll put it that way.
I honestly think Quantumania would have been taken a lot. Like, I think the fans would have liked it better if we didn't already know Kang was the bad guy of the phase. Like, if it was just a surprise villain in the movie, I think everyone would have been like wowed by that film because it was a good film. It's just in context of knowing that it's just a small part of a bigger thing. And you're like, really? This is how we're introducing this guy?
Yeah.
Yikes. Yeah. Yeah, I've never liked Kang, not for any particular reason. I've just never been a fan. Obviously, the Jonathan Major legal stuff is really messing with Disney. I have no idea what they're going to do. I hear rumors they're going to swap him for Doctor Doom, which personally I would love. I like Doctor Doom way more.
I'm still mad they didn't set him up in Wakanda Forever like I thought they were going to do.
Wakanda Forever, I've recently changed my mind about. This is a side, like a small side thing. I did not like that movie at first when I watched it because it felt like just propaganda. Then also because I have a lot of preconceived notions about stuff because I read a lot of comics, right? I know what Namor is supposed to be like. I know that he's not just a villain. I know all this stuff. And then I watched it. It was like, well, let me pretend like I don't know anything. Like, I'm just someone who only watches the movies. And when I look at it through that lens, it's a phenomenal film. If I don't know who Namor is, wow, this is an interesting character. Like, really, truly. The problem is that I already know these things. So it kind of spoiled it for me. And of course, there's T'Challa. Yeah.
And that's an impossible situation. It's like the Carrie Fisher situation they had for episode 9. Like, I would not envy any writer who had to make the decision, this is how we're going to handle this. Like, ultimately, for me, as much as I love Chadwick, I would have recasted and had a new person play Black Panther, or play T'Challa, but that's me. This is what they chose to do. The film is fine. It's never going to be one of my favorites.
See, personally, I would have gone for I would have done something insane. That, to me, that's one of those moments where there isn't a good answer. So let's just make a gamble. Let's go something crazy. Turns out this whole time, T'Challa's been dating Storm from X-Men. Just like the comics, Storm becomes Black Panther. Yes, it would be absurd, but hey, you know what? I think introducing the X-Men would have got people showing up.
Yeah, that's one relationship I've never cared for.
I liked it personally. Anyway, that's a comic book thing. That's not an MCU thing.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't think it ever will be, given circumstances. But let's go to, how do you feel? We obviously disagree. Give me your take. Why you didn't like Supernatural post season 5? I think we agree for the first 5 seasons afterwards, and then we disagree about the ending. But let's start. Let's start where we agree, and then build off that.
It is the definition of a show that has outrun its welcome. That at this point in time, you had a perfect ending. You decide to keep going
That's
because,
true.
hey, you're making money. You know what? That's what you do. Studios, you're making money, you keep going. It doesn't matter about it, creative integrity or anything like that. That's what they do. So they fumbled a bit, had enough of a following to keep going, and eventually things do improve 10 to 5 through 15. Writing wise, story wise, but as far as the elements they introduce, as far as villains they introduce, it still feels hollow to me, even though there are really good episodes in there. Like, I mean, mentioned Scooby Natural earlier. Like, I would die for that episode. It is like so much fun. And I have to wait 13-ish seasons to get to that, to wade through all the film, but it's worth it.
For those who don't
But
know, Scooby Natural is exactly what it sounds like. I don't need any other explanation. It's exactly what it sounds like.
yes,
That's it.
but from a writing standpoint, from a character standpoint, I do agree they do grow. Sam and Dean and Castiel a little bit along the way. But it also gets to that point where, like, directionless is a good way to put it. Like, they don't know what they're doing until they do have a story. It's not a good story, in my opinion, but they have a plan, which is a lot better than I could say for other things that we've talked about on the show sometimes before. And it does lead to where they wanted it to go eventually in season 15. As far as I can tell, like, they had an idea of where they were going, which is nice and refreshing. But I just don't like where they took me.
That's fair. That's fair. So for me, and there's going to be lots of spoilers here. Again, those 5 seasons were just, but there was a lot of character development I loved. I loved how Dean finally explores the trauma of. For those who don't know, Dean has been literally through hell and back. So has Sam. I think there's a lot of character development with those two that I really like. Dean and Sam being the main protagonists of the show, the two brothers. Incredible character growth. Crowley, we've only saw him once. He becomes the king of hell, and we see him go through this whole character arc. I'm going to get to why I love the end later on, but man, his character arc, incredible. Castiel, you go from an angel who's just kind of like learning free will is a good thing to, wait a minute, God's not showing back up. What do? I need to lead heaven so that it doesn't become that, which I have personally felt that. I think my thing with a lot of this is Castiel is the most relatable character to me in all of television. Maybe outside of Luffy from One Piece. Because I'm watching him, and even I remember season 5 whenever he stops by because they're in the middle of the apocalypse, and he's a little drunk. They're like, wait a minute, how are you drunk? He's like, I found a liquor store, and I drank it. And I'm like, yeah, that's I relate to Castiel very well. Because when you realize, and this is, again, maybe because I'm a little more progressive than Christian, when you realize a lot of the stuff that you held to as dogmatic religious truth, you don't believe it anymore, and you have to fight for something else, then all of a sudden you're put in this situation where everything you built your life around isn't quite what you believe. And you're like, I don't know what to do. Because it seems like doing nothing is straight up evil at this point. Doing nothing means Satan wins or everyone dies, right? That's an impossible situation to be in. And then doing something means acting against every single thing you ever taught yourself and ever believed, all the way up to that point, which for Castiel is thousands of years. So seeing how he was put in that situation, all of a sudden heaven is without God, and he's going, do I lead the church? Do I leave heaven to be something better? Or do I just let it all die? Impossible situation. And then watching him get corrupted, get power hungry, fall to the point of below human, and then build back up to an angel. His storyline, incredible. The problem is each season's story was garbage. The characters themselves are having great stories. The seasons, why? Even the Mark of Cain season, I don't like the season. What it did for Dean's character, I love. So there was a lot of like character stuff that I liked, even though I didn't like a lot of the seasons. I didn't get season 10. Lucifer's son, I don't remember if that's season 10 or 11 or when, the sun shows up. And all of a sudden, you have a Nephilim that's more powerful than angels who can actually do something, who can challenge God himself. And you get into this story of if God is creating all of this misery, a world of just pain and suffering, maybe we need a new God. I love the concept. As someone who has been challenged a lot of my own religious beliefs, even though I don't agree with where they took the show, I love just exploring the question of suffering, of why would we want a God that allows all this, all those things, and the importance of free will. I love where they took the story. My big problem with 10 through 15 would be it's telling the same story as 1 through 5, right? Like it's telling the same story, just a lot more convoluted. I happen to love it because I love the characters, but it's the same story. Like, if we're just being honest, it's telling the same thing. The reason I bring up Crowley, though, the one thing season 1 through 5 didn't have for me that season 10 through 15 does, you have the king of hell, a demon, the demon of all demons, go through a story arc where it actually makes sense when he chooses to lay down his life to help the humans win their own free will. To me, that's one of the greatest moments in TV. That forgives a lot of sins for me. Sorry, I'm not just trying to gush over Supernatural, but I really do. I love how they eventually redeemed all those terrible years for me. So I love it. And I will probably be rewatching the whole series soon because this conversation reminded me how much I love it. The MCU, there isn't that much depth to it. There is, man, I like Kamala Khan. She's cool. And man, Falcon Winter Soldier, that was a good series. Maybe in 10 years, I'll finally get to see a follow-up to that. And I think that's the problem is the MCU is just so less consistent. With Supernatural, even in the bad years, I knew I was going to see Crowley. I was going to watch him develop. I knew I was going to see Castiel. I was going to watch him develop. I loved that. In the MCU, you're constantly being post the snap. We're constantly being introduced to new characters, and we have no idea what we're going to get. It might be a flop. It might be great. Who knows? And it might not be related to anything else at all. Look at Echo recently. It kind of is related to Daredevil. That's it. Yeah. I'm not really getting the story progressed. I'm not really seeing how Sam Wilson's progressing as a character. I think if we had more stuff like that, it would do better. So that's where I'm
at. I think for the MCU, one of my main issues is bloat. And I'm not opposed because guess what? This is the Marvel Universe. There's going to be a lot of characters. So that means these are going to get bloated. But if you're going to get bloated well. Like one of my main issues is that maybe 8 or 9 times out of 10 for any series that came out, my issue has been we didn't spend enough time in this story to make me care or to be done well. So as much as I love Kamala, I thought the Miss Marvel series needed more time. The Clandestine were some of the most forgettable villains I have ever seen in a show. Accurate. I would have loved to have seen her more interact with her family more, with her friends more, exploring her powers a little more. And I did not particularly care for the Marvels when that came out. Like as that was showing, it's like, okay. It's like Bree's interpretation has not been my favorite. I liked her more in Avengers than I did in her original film. This second time around for her, this wasn't really a solo, but I didn't really care for her there. Goodness gracious. Or Spectrum / Captain Marvel, Photon, or whatever they called her in the movie. I can't remember. Like, I enjoyed her story. Kamala was a delight in that story. But it kind of failed overall because I didn't care about what they were doing with the villain. I didn't care about what they were doing with the story. The same thing. Echo was fine. I think I gave it a 7 out of 10 on that other episode I did for What's New. Yeah. That's mostly because we don't get enough. For She-Hulk, we didn't get enough. Convince me of her ability, like she can control it better than the Hulk because she's a woman. I could not stand that line. The Hulk, who has gone through way much more than her, Bruce Banner has been under way more stress than her with what they've set up. Like if they had done differently and set up more for her, I could believe that a little more. but I hated how it was handled. Um,
Mhm.
like, give me more of these characters, which is why I'm glad that Daredevil seems to be like what, like 18-ish episodes.
Yeah. Now we're
That's
getting some.
what it that's what it needs for me to
Mhm.
care about the story you're telling and the characters to come back. Hopefully that's done well.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think that's the problem is it keeps expanding, but we're not really building relationships with these characters. So with Supernatural, we had Castiel, we had Crowley. And even if you didn't like the show, which most, a lot, let's be real, most Supernatural fans weren't loving the show. We still tuned in because we wanted to see these characters. We loved the characters so much that it forgave a lot of bad story. I mean, just being honest, MCU's at a point where the stories aren't great, and then you're going to introduce a new character. Well, I don't care about this character. Why would I bother showing up? You know, truly, like if I didn't do this podcast, I might not have even watched Echo. I'm like, there's a good chance it's a flop. I don't really care about this character. Why would I show up? Why? Because Kingpin was there. That's really the only good reason.
Pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, and that's happening time and time again. Like it'd be different if, you know, think back MCU Phase One. Iron Man 1 and Iron Man 2 were both in Phase 1 because we're having to build relationship with these characters. It's we're building relationship with fictional characters. I know that's weird, but like that's how story works. And if I don't have a relationship, I don't care about the story. And that's where I personally think the MCU can learn a lot from Supernatural because even through the flops, I think we'd forgive it if it was characters that we genuinely were invested and cared for. I think that's why Ryan Doe still loves Love and Thunder because they're invested in Thor, right? Like that's a good reason to watch it, even though I don't like the story that much. Not trying to speak for him, I'm just saying. But for me, if Sam Wilson was in more of these other shows, I'd love it. Like I might not care about the show, but I'd watch it for Sam Wilson. But I think the problem is that, and then the other side of this issue is a lot of their plans in Disney have just been falling to misfortune, more or less. I think they were planning on building the MCU around the Black Panther, T'Challa. Obviously, they can't do that, which, rest in peace. I love Chadwick Boseman so much. Like, literally, I saw him in the movie 42, looked at my brother, and I tell this story a lot. I told my brother, that guy's going to be Black Panther one day. And my brother looked me in the eyes and said, they'll never make a Black Panther movie. Josh, you're crazy. I called it. I loved it. I thought it was perfect casting. I think that Tom Holland, I think they're planning to build a lot around Spider-Man, and he's had a lot of issues, so he hasn't been in the movie. They're planning a lot to build around the villain with Jonathan Major, and that legal issues came up. I think a lot of characters they wanted to build around are coming up against issue against issue against issue, and I think they're grasping at straws trying to figure out what to do since the characters they wanted to build around aren't working out. What do you think?
And once again, it's unfortunate. Like there is no easy answer to this. As much as I don't want the answer I have, if you're going to do this, recast. And I don't think that would be disrespectful to Chadwick. I don't think it would show that they never cared about him. To me, that would show is like, hey, that character meant that much. He is still part of this universe. He is that important. We're going to keep him around. But when that changes, okay, well, what's your backup plan? And so far, the backup plan is we'll just throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks. It is what it feels like. And
Yeah.
no, it's great. Like I said, No Way Home, tremendously great, fun movie, 10 out of 10. But it's hard to build the MCU around Peter Parker when you have that deal with Sony, where you have to split the profits and all that mess, and everything gets messed up there because people are greedy, and that's just how it is. So, who is our guy right now? Is it Ant-Man? Is it Scott Lang? Is he our guy? Is it Sam Wilson? Like
Loki?
Captain America: Winter Soldier, I enjoyed for the most part, but once again, it suffered from that problem. It needed more time spent for me to care with people. His whole speech about the end of do better is like, okay, well, how? How are we supposed to do better? Like, if Sam had said, give more reasons for how they could do better, I'd agree with them wholeheartedly. It's like, convince me this man is Captain America. And for the most part, they did. The ending episode to that point didn't really catch me as much as they wanted it to, because once
I
again, it
liked
wasn't as
it.
fleshed out as it should have been. But I'm still like, hey, build it around Sam. And when was the last time we saw him? Brave New World is not coming out until next year, I think.
Yeah,
It's been 5 years ish.
yeah, and that's where this comparison gets interesting, because I remember times in like season 7, season 8 of Supernatural where I wasn't watching every week, but then I heard, oh, Crowley's in the next episode. He's the main character of the next episode. I'm like, I'm watching that episode. I'm tuning in because Crowley's awesome. I want to see what happens next to him. And I think that's the problem. Like the MCU, and what's weird is it's like they're choosing the wrong characters, not just because of like some of the misfortunes that happen, but also like, hello, every fangirl in the world wants to see more Bucky Barnes. Why have I not seen Bucky Barnes for like 5 years? Like, come on. Like it's just there's some stuff that I'm like, you guys, I didn't like Shang-Chi, but a lot of people loved that movie.
You didn't like Shang-Chi?
No, I was so bored. I didn't get it, but
Okay.
so many people love that.
Okay.
And he's made one appearance. Why? Like you have characters that people are in love with. Showcase them, bring them out. Stop expanding. Focus on the reason why people are showing up in the first place. That, yeah, I know that.
And another thing that wasn't their fault was COVID. That ruined a lot of plans.
That's true.
And so things had to get rewritten. Things had to be replanned around a disease that a lot of people weren't taking as seriously as they should have. Mm-hmm. And we ended up in a state that we're in, where it's still around. It's just not as prevalent in people's minds because the media isn't covering it as much. So it's not their fault a global pandemic happened. True. But hey, you've got to be flexible. You got to figure out how to get stuff done. And if this is the multi-billion-dollar company's best way of getting stuff done, what hope does anyone else have?
Oh man, yeah, not great. To transition back a little bit, I think to me, like I mentioned, part of why 10 through 15 works is because of this guy on the screen. No, that's not James from Systematic Ecology. In my mind, he looks like James. That's Jack from Supernatural. That's Lucifer's son. And I think the new blood, the new character, introduces a new storyline that I personally loved. And I think it brought new life to the show. It allowed them to have a real story again instead of just kind of grabbing at anything. The MCU is starting to do that. You see them starting to build the Young Avengers. You have Kamala Khan starting to build a team at the end of the Marvels, right? You see Kate Bishop. I love Kate Bishop. I love Kamala Khan. I love some of these characters that they're doing. Do you think the Young Avengers can do what Jack did for Supernatural and help them find a new story, something like a fresh breath? Looks like no. But
specifically for Jack, no. I think the decisions they made with him is like kind of what you were talking about earlier, wrestling with the problem of evil in the story from a more secular lens. Well, that's going to be your answer. Well, God should just be better. God is either evil to allow evil to exist, or he's incompetent, in a more secularized way of viewing things, versus God allowing it to give people time to repent, and he's given plenty of time to people. In my point of view, how I look at scripture, then you get to Jack here in this series, who is son of Lucifer and a human woman, becoming a Nephilim by that design. Is that actually how Nephilim work in scripture? Who knows? We weren't there. We get Jack. And it comes to the point of, hey, struggling with that. We get a bit of Sam in there. Kind of, you mentioned earlier, Sam, seasons 1 through 5, was struggling with those inner demons, some of them quite literal, and figuring out how he could use his powers for good. And, oh no, I accidentally killed someone with them, or I used them the wrong way. How can I make up for that? That was interesting. But their ultimate decision to make him a god who just kind of stands by and says, good luck, everybody. But I'm still going to leave monsters in the world so Dean can die. And that's fun. I didn't care for that. But do you have anything you want to say on that before I go to the Young Avengers? Because I know you love it more than me.
I see where you're coming from. I don't think it's a bad argument. A god that does nothing also seems cruel. Which, there's a reason we struggled with the problem of evil for so long. A TV show wasn't going to suddenly solve it.
Yes.
There is this whole issue of, if there's an all-powerful, all-good god, why does evil exist? And I think the show did a good job of showing, well, a god that does something about it looks like someone who's controlling all of us and writing our lives for us. And that's not a very loving God. Man, I sound like Thomas Ward there. And then you see the other side. Thomas Ward might love Supernatural. We should ask him. We see the other side here of an all-powerful, all-good God that lets everyone make their own choices because he loves them. And then there's monsters and evil afoot and everyone's dying. Man, that still kind of doesn't really feel like love, does it? So I see that. I don't think they came up with the solution to the problem of evil. I don't think they did. I do think
That's
the
not
point
their
that,
fault.
yeah, but I think their point that free will is better than predestination. As someone who grew up Pentecostal, I like that. I'm for that. Yeah, sure. That's a better alternative. They're both bad, but I like that better. Being a universalist, I'm a big fan of a God that saves everyone in the long run. But that's not what they did. So, but they got closer to that than I think they did your beliefs. I think they were closer to my belief of eventually everyone will make it to heaven than
Yeah.
The more traditional Christian beliefs, I guess.
But as far as the Young Avengers are concerned, I think there is huge potential in them. Like they can be the
Yes.
faces. I like what is Kamala's actress's name? I should know this.
Me too. I was hoping you wouldn't ask.
I can't remember off the top of my head, but she is her. She's able to embody
But
Kamala
she's
really well.
great.
I can see a world where they make her, assuming the other heroes start to retire as
Iman
well.
Vellani?
Yes, Amon. She is fantastic. She could be the face for a new Marvel universe. I could see that happening. Like having her be the one to lead these new Avengers, these young Avengers, even though it's not how it happens in the comics, that's perfectly fine because that's what you have in the MCU right now. Like you're dealing with the fact that unfortunately characters age, actors age, so you're gonna have to make this work. Like what is Kate Bishop's actress's name? I can't remember off the top of my head. She is now in her 20s. Versus like Kate Bishop, who's supposed to be in her teens. Like that's not the actress's fault that she is a human being who has to age.
Yeah.
So they are younger than the other Avengers. They can make this work. I enjoyed what she did in Hawkeye. For Scarlet Witch's kids, like there's potential there. They're not built up really well because maybe that'll change with Agatha. Maybe that's what'll make that the Andor of the MCU is that I actually care, and I know you don't care for Andor. That's your fault. That's your problem.
It is my fault.
But like maybe they can make me care about them. So we have Speed and Wiccan providing the magic and the mutant more powers there. Like it is full of potential. The problem is I don't have enough faith in the writers to do it at this point in time with what they've delivered. It is not impossible. I want to be wrong. I want to enjoy the movies that I watch and the television shows that I watch, but they have not given me enough to believe in them since stuff like Endgame or Guardians or No Way Home.
Yeah. Yeah. I think if we saw more of the characters, if we saw more of She-Hulk, I really like She-Hulk. I know that's controversial. If we saw more of her, we saw more of Kamala Khan, Kate Bishop, Sam Wilson. If we saw more of those four characters, I feel like we could grow attachment. I could see them building a whole new story. The biggest hurdle after you actually build relationship with these characters would be, I think you need to establish the next threat is just as serious as Thanos. And I don't see how you do that without that threat somehow beating Thanos in another dimension or something weird. I don't know how you do that. It's harder when you get to Marvel because it's more sci-fi and stuff, and Supernatural is supernatural. They just have to literally can just go through different religions and go, boop, there it is, God. Yeah, that's better. That's bigger than Satan. He's the bad guy. Like they have source material. Marvel does too with the comics, but it's a little bit harder to show it because it's a lot less familiar to people, I think. Everyone knows who God is. Everyone knows who Satan or Lucifer is for the most part. Supernatural didn't have to show as much as I think Marvel does to prove that its bad guys are bad. So there's that. I think it's a little bit easier for a show of that design with that kind of source material. But we'll see. I hope they do build around Kamala Khan and Kate Bishop. Those two characters, both. I loved them. I thought they were great. But again, time will tell. Before we go, I did want to ask you, I think a lot of us feel this way in our own lives at time. Not that we've gone through an apocalypse, but I think everyone has a time where they feel directionless. They feel like okay, I finished college. I don't know what's next. I got married. I don't know what's next. My whole life has been building to this moment. Now what? Or even sometimes maybe you dropped out of college. Maybe you didn't even succeed, and you're like, oh, well, if my life's not this, what is it? What what do you say to those people? Like, is there anything we can learn from these television series? I mean, is it we just got to surround ourselves with the right characters? I mean, like, what do people do when they feel directionless in life? I guess is what I'm trying to get to.
And I'll tell you how I do it wrong first. My first instinct is to always rely on me and never once tell
Yeah.
anyone, "Hey, I'm going through this. I'm wrestling with this," or it's always me telling myself in a sinful fashion, "You can do it on your own. You're a lone wolf Christian. You don't need the church. You don't need your friends. You don't need Jesus. You can do it, Christian." And sometimes I can. Most of the time, I can't. And I convince myself I am because that means Christian is in charge.
Yeah.
That is a terrible outlook. I'm not in charge. I've never been in charge. You don't want me in charge. Even when I lie to myself and say that I do, I know that's the wrong choice.
Yeah.
So for me, what I've always had to do is I have to take that honest assessment of myself and say, okay, remember the last time you did this? Remember the time before that you did this? How did that go for you? Chances are the answer is it went poorly. Oh, well, then how did you improve? Oh, I told people. I confessed my sins. I went to people and said, "Hey, I am wrestling with this. Pray for me. Help me through this process." People I trusted, people who wouldn't talk behind my back and say, "You know what Christian's doing? Oh no, yeah, he calls himself a child of God, and that's what he's doing." It's like that. There's a way to go about this, and it takes trust in other people. It takes believing in them, wanting the best for you, and believing in a God who also wants the best for you. And that's difficult because that means giving up control, which is something I wrestle with every single day. And he's had to teach me over and over again, you're not in charge.
Mhm.
Listen to me. So it takes a certain amount of humbleness to just come out and say, I can't do it. I am directionless. I don't know where to go. I need to talk to people who can help me.
Yeah. Yeah. Here's the moral of the story. But this time, I feel like it fit too well. Like when I'm thinking about it, going, oh yeah, the reason that it could pull past these directionless moments are the characters. And then the more I think about it, like, yeah, no, it is true of my own life, right? Like I can look to times. Um, I'll just let you know. Like I remember past my accident and stuff, different things have transpired where I was over ministry. I dropped out of college. I lost a relationship that I thought I was absolutely meant to be with, like all this stuff, right? And I remember feeling that there was no point anymore. And a lot of times, when I got up in the morning, the reason I left the house at all, if I did leave the house, was because of certain people in my life, right? It was like I was tuning into that next episode because I knew Crowley was there, you know? And, I'm thinking about it. And I remember having a moment where I sat down with someone and he just asked me, what's going on? And I was like, I don't have a point. I don't see any direction. And just to have, you know, for me, a mentor at that time who could speak life into that moment, if that character was not part of the show that is Josh's life, the show might have ended. I might have just not had the will to press on, especially considering that's around the time my accident happened. It takes a lot of willpower to make it through some of the stuff like that. I think if I didn't have any hope, any reason to, I might not have. So, I'm looking at these things going, yeah, sometimes I know it's cheesy to add this moral of the story at the end, guys, and I'm sorry. But I do think, yeah, sometimes in our own lives, we might feel directionless. Like, what's the point? We did the big thing. What's next? It seems like there's no real story going on. I think that's when it's important to surround yourself with the new Avengers and read Kamala Khan comics. No, Christian, do you have anything else you wanted to add?
Just be willing to do an honest self-assessment of yourself. Know who you are. Like what makes me wrestle with life is not necessarily going to be the same for you.
Yeah.
Just don't say, well, he's going through that, therefore it has to happen to me. It's like, no, like find it out, be honest and say, I am deficient here, or I think I'm in control here when I'm obviously not. Like,
Yeah.
find that out, be honest, and say, okay, how can I improve from here? And who am I going to let know that I can trust and is looking out for me that will help me in this process. Will ask you, hey, how are things going there? Like, did you do that thing you were saying you're going to do? Like, I mean, for me right now, one of those things is, I don't know if I've told this on the show yet. I was recently diagnosed as pre-diabetic the last time I went to the doctor. And right now, part of me being accountable is I have people in my family, friends here that are saying, hey, are you committing to that new diet you said you were going to do?
Mm.
Are you drinking the soft drinks you said you were going to stop drinking in your bedroom where you were drinking 4 or 5 bottles a day? And that's how you ended up in the predicament you were in?
Ooh,
Like,
ooh.
it is
Nice
possible
reaching at
for me to
me.
reverse this. Yeah. I was doing very bad things for my body. And people were telling me not to do it, but I wasn't listening. So it took this to get that done. But it also took me going to them and saying, hey, I am changing these things. I need you to hold me accountable.
Hmm. Yeah, man, good stuff. Good stuff. So, guys, surround yourself with reliable, good characters. Press on, no matter what it is. Everybody's going through something all the time. Like, it's not, you know, our stuff isn't any bigger or less big than yours. Everyone has stuff that they need to go through, challenges that we got to make through with the help of our communities and obviously God's answer here. Jesus is the answer to everything, right? But we don't want to just say Jesus. That feels like a cop out. But also Jesus. And with that, we're going to go ahead and move on. Recommendations. Christian, as far as like what you've been into, like what is there anything you would recommend to the audience today? I can do mine first. You need time to think about it.
No, I got it. I don't know if I've recommended this before. It certainly sounds like something I would have in the past. But if you want like the way Supernatural kind of handles its deities to an extent, go and read American Gods by Neil Gaiman. It is fantastic. Well deserved of your time to read this book. It is in my top 10 books of all time. I don't remember exactly where I place it, but it is on that list. Go check it out.
I would just love to see that list. For me, this is a recommendation I had earlier this morning. I was talking to James, another host of the show, and he recommended something to me, and I watched it, and I was like, oh, no, I'm going to recommend it to everybody else because I thought this was really good. So Monsters 103, Mercy's Dragon Damnation. It's on Netflix. It is based on a manga that Oda wrote before One Piece. They do tie it to One Piece in this little anime short, but it's like a one-off 25-minute thing. You don't need any context to watch it. I thought it was a really good self-contained story. I was like, wow, this was good. Very wholesome. You don't have to worry about kids being in the room. But I thought it was great. So I highly recommend 103 Dragon Damnation, whatever it's called. If you just type in 103 Dragons and Damnation to Netflix, you'll find it. So check it out. I think it's great. Be sure to rate and review our show, Podchaser, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Since you're on YouTube, smash that like button, share with a friend, hit subscribe, all those things. They really do help the show a lot, so we appreciate those of you who do it. And a big thanks to James Barrett again for supporting the show. You rock, dude. And remember, everybody, we're all a chosen people, a geekdom of priests.